Right, that's Arish Sharma, the architect of these recommendations, in conversation with Gauri Dwivedi of ET Now, breaking that big story for us right here. Remember, he's been only in conversation with your channel, and I'm given to understand Rajan Mathews is joining us live right here on camera as well. Rajan, thank you very much for being with us on the phone, and finally, we're happy to see you on camera. But let's take this forward, and I'm going to perhaps, at the sound of sounding repetitive, go back and talk about some of the issues that we discussed. 700 megahertz being put up for auction, that's been a bone of contention. What's your take on that?
So very clearly, we agree with the TRAI chairman that the industry has been asking for additional spectrum. And so the fact that the regulator is putting up this wide band of spectrum, both the 700, additional 800, some marginal amounts of 900, 1800, and then of course 2100 is the other band that we are hoping will also be put up. That really gives a significant quantum of spectrum, so we can't complain anymore that the auction is going to be constrained by a lack of spectrum. The issue now is really the question of what is the price points. Now, we had calculated the 700 5 megahertz band pan-India coming to about 6 to 7 billion US dollars. That's a significant amount of money to shell out for any operator, given the present situation of their balance sheets and the debt that is presently on their balance sheet. So we are going to have to wait very carefully to look at the methodology that was adopted by the TRAI. If you recall, in the last go-around, the pricing was dependent upon 4 models that were used. So the question is, when we revisit that modeling, we'll have to wait to see them. There is obviously a significant change in the marketplace in terms of consolidation, spectrum sharing, spectrum trading. This has got to have an impact on the value of the incremental spectrum that is going to be put up. So we will want to take a very close look at the pricing model to see whether that makes sense. Right now, at first blush, it does look on the higher side, but we'll wait to see the details once we get the paper.
Wondering if there's ever going to be a day in Indian telecom when operators will actually turn around and say that pricing has been reasonable, because this really hasn't been the case so far. But let's take it across to Gauri Dwivedi, my colleague, who's breaking that story for us and got us that exclusive interaction with the architect of these recommendations, Arish Sharma. Let's take it across then to Gauri. Gauri, you know, the bit about change in marketplace, there is spectrum trading, there is spectrum sharing that is now being allowed. You think there is so much appetite for spectrum that's available now, and at the cost point at which it is? I mean, 1800 megahertz actually went in for 1577 crore rupees. We've seen prices jack up to almost double, 2600 crore rupees here, and 900 megahertz, which is of course the superior spectrum, at 9300 crore rupees versus the discovered price of 7183 just a year back, and 700 megahertz that we've been speaking about for a while now, 11,000 crore rupees. That's very, very high up as far as the industry is concerned. Will there be appetite, given how the nature of the industry has changed, the nature of regulations and norms have changed?
Supriya, appetite is definitely something that's a huge question mark, especially given the fact that the prices that we're talking about, of course, they are very high. But keep in mind that in the last 1 year, now the TRAI's hands to some extent are curtailed by the fact that there is an auction discovered price, and the next round of auction can only begin on a higher price note, keeping in mind the SBI PLR rate. That's the basic thumb rule with which TRAI's pricing mechanics go. So to that extent, TRAI is constrained in the entire reserve price discovery exercise. Having said that, 700 megahertz, of course, is the big elephant in the room, so to say. That's the band that everybody knows is the most superior band. In fact, if you talk in terms of efficiency parameters, just one statistic I'll give you, that is that when you deploy 700 megahertz, the cost of deployment is 70% less than a 2300 megahertz or a 2100 megahertz. And that, of course, tells you how superior this band is, which is why TRAI feels that it's right in pricing it so much more expensive than some of the other bands. In fact, the pricing discovery exercise TRAI has used is that 700 has been priced at 4 times of 1800 megahertz. That's the broad thumb rule of 700 pricing that TRAI has used this time around. Having said that, look at the brighter side. In fact, telecom companies and Mr. Mathews have every reason to to see the brighter side of it, which is that 2 years back, TRAI had said that 700 should in fact be priced at twice of 900. And if you go by that number, it could have been 18,000, upwards of 18,000 crore rupees. So definitely some brighter side to this as well, that this time around TRAI feels that at least for bands where no auction has taken place, there is no price discovered as yet, there can be some room for actually bringing in rational prices.
Rajan, let me throw your rationale at you. You spoke about how prices are still looking at a higher side, and like Gauri is pointing out there, it's not twice of 900 megahertz, it's actually just a little over that, 11,000 crore rupees versus 9,300 crore rupees and 900 megahertz. So you've got something to cheer about, don't you?
Shrinate, it's a half full, half empty type of situation. Let me just sort of throw this out there. I think when we talk about pricing, we're saying obviously auction is something we're committed to, and auction process is something that will give us price discovery. However, I think it's time to look at the overall picture in terms of profitability of the industry. Does it still continue to make sense to ask the industry to pay 8% as license fee when you pay this type of amount upfront? Does it still make sense to charge us 3 to 5% as SUC fee? Does it still make sense to tack on additional levies on the industry? I think it's time for the DOT to start considering issues like the national agenda. How do we get to connect the 1 billion? Should we be looking at tax holidays like the Honorable Prime Minister suggested for startups? We're almost in a new phase of a startup in terms of digital rollouts and data uptake. So I think we need to start looking holistically and saying, if you're paying these large amounts for spectrum, we've got to look at the other end of the financial spectrum and say, let's begin to rationalize some of these other costs that overall we can get the investments necessary to put into our networks, which is ultimately the proof of the pudding for the customer.
All right, the idea is to not put it on customer, but Gauri, let me throw this back at you, and Rajan, do stay with us. This whole debate about how spectrum-starved telcos are, and which is why they need more spectrum, and Mr. Sharma was speaking to you about it when you were having that conversation with him. Does he believe this is going to solve the problem in the industry? Because Rajan here believes, and he continues to say, that this is very highly priced. There isn't such appetite for spectrum at a price point like that.
Well, Supriya, if you take the entire quantity of the spectrum that is being put up or that will be put up for auction, if you take away 700, you take away 2300 and you take away 2500 megahertz, leaving those bands aside, your regular 2G, 3G bands, that is 800, 900 and 1800, there is not a lot of spectrum that will be put up for auction. To that extent, the argument that this auction will end as far as all call drop issues and end telecom companies' woes is a little misplaced to some extent, because a lot of spectrum is actually coming from these bands where there may not be that much of appetite. 700, DOT is still questioning whether or not it should be auctioned right now. As far as 2300 and 2500 are concerned, where has the deployment happened? 6 years after 2300 auction, no deployment has happened. Rel Jio is yet to launch. BSNL has returned the spectrum. So to that extent, if you leave aside all these three bands, there is not that much of spectrum to address the spectrum crunch issue of the industry.
Rajan, you concur with Gauri there that the fact that, 1800, 900 may not be put up for such auction, the whole issue of being spectrum starved and the quality of service, that argument still stays very misplaced. Do you agree with her?
So I think at a way of thinking, yes, we need to look at it in terms of the 23 and the 25 really not being of significant interest to the industry. Clearly, we're looking at the 2100. The 900 and 1800, there's only fragmented amounts of spectrum there. None of it is contiguous. So I think anybody who's looking at 900 and 1800 is really looking to make sure that they can pick up the pieces to put together a 5 megahertz band. So it's going to be kind of a one-off. Clearly, the interest is going to be in the 700, but at the price points that we're talking about, we're talking about even at the price point of discovered 900, 6 to 7 billion US dollars, leaves precious little for any operator to begin to start raising money to invest in the network. And I think that's where we really need to focus, saying is that, okay, fine, if you're going to extract these large amounts of money upfront, how does it make sense to continue to extract 12, 15% on an ongoing basis over over the life of the license. Maybe we should look at a 25-year license where the first 5 years is kind of held in abeyance, so it gives operators the time not only to bid, but then wait for the ecosystem to catch up and then take it forward. So there are all kinds of alternative ways of mitigating the high prices that perhaps might be put on the table. But we need to look at this holistically.
All right, mitigating the high prices that are being put on the table is the word from Rajan Mathews. Always a pleasure chatting with you, Rajan, on everything related with Indian Telecom. Gauri Dwivedi, thank you very much for breaking that big story for us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.